first witness is Ms. Elise Bean, the director of the Washington office of the Carl Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy at Wayne State University Law School. Ms. Bean worked as an investigator for Senator Carl Levin for 30 years, including 15 years at the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations as staff director and chief counsel. After leaving the Senate, she helped establish the Levin Center and now works to help legislators and staff conduct oversight investigations. Next, we welcome Dr. Matthew Glassman, a senior fellow at the Government Affairs Institute at Georgetown University. Prior to joining GAI, Matt spent 10 years on Capitol Hill at the Congressional Research Service, including 2 years as a detailee to the Legislative Branch Subcommittee on the House Committee on Appropriations. And our final witness is Dr. Nicholas Hart, President and CEO of Data Foundation. Previously, Dr. Hart served as the director of the Bipartisan Policy Center's Evidence Project, building on his work as Policy and Research Director for the U.S. Commission on Evidence-Based Policymaking. Thank you to our second panel of witnesses for being with us this afternoon. Please remember to press the button on the microphone in front of you so the light comes on, and when you begin speaking, you'll have 5 minutes. After 4, the light will turn yellow, and when the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would kindly ask that you please wrap up your comments. And at this time, I am delighted to recognize Ms. Bean for 5 minutes.
Subcommittee Chair Bice, Ranking Member Kilmer, and the subcommittee members, thank you for this opportunity to support the subcommittee's efforts to modernize and strengthen the Congressional Research Service, especially because CRS strongly supports congressional oversight. As you mentioned, I represent the Carl Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy, which is part of Wayne State University Law School in Detroit. Senator Levin used to say, good government requires good oversight. He also appreciated the fact that the Supreme Court has long recognized Congress's need for information to carry out its constitutional duties. Nearly 100 years ago, in an 8-0 opinion upholding a congressional subpoena seeking information related to the Attorney General, the Supreme Court wrote, quote, "The power of inquiry with process to enforce it is an essential and appropriate auxiliary to the legislative function. A legislative body cannot legislate wisely or effectively in the absence of information," end quote. The Supreme Court recently explicitly reaffirmed those principles in 2020 in the Mazars case. Investigating facts, what happened and why, and analyzing complex problems are at the heart of congressional oversight. They're critical to Congress's work to enact effective legislation, allocate federal funds, inform the public about what its government is doing, and act as a check on the executive branch. 60 years ago, the Supreme Court held that, quote, "It is unquestionably the duty of all citizens to cooperate with the Congress in its efforts to obtain facts needed for intelligent legislative action," end quote. The duty to cooperate with congressional information requests, including through CRS, applies to federal agencies no less than others and is fundamental to the checks and balances envisioned by the Constitution. CRS has long played a key role in helping Congress gather facts and conduct effective oversight. CRS employs hundreds of experts whose sole responsibility is to answer questions and provide research requested by Congress. CRS has also built a reputation as a source of nonpartisan, reliable information trusted by both sides of the aisle. And it produces a wealth of data in service to Congress. Its latest annual report states that in fiscal 2022, CRS responded to over 73,000 congressional requests for information. Senator Levin and his staff made frequent use of CRS. To offer one example, some years ago, Senator Levin wanted to investigate how you set gasoline prices. At the time, his staff knew very little about the subject. So we called in CRS experts who provided multiple briefings to educate both sides of the aisle at the same time on key facts: how the gasoline market worked, what factors affected price, where do you get data on gasoline prices over time, and much more. It was invaluable assistance given our limited staff, our limited resources, and limited time. CRS was a force multiplier. And that's just one example. The CRS annual report includes a list 65 pages long of reports and other written products issued during a single year on a vast array of topics for Congress. Examples include U.S. immigration courts and the pending cases backlog, the dark web, an overview, a primer on China and Hong Kong, cost-benefit analysis in federal agency rulemaking. To produce those types of reports, CRS needs access to data held by federal agencies. For over 50 years, to obtain agency information, CRS has relied on a federal statute, 2 U.S.C. Section 166, which requires federal agencies to comply with CRS information requests when those requests are authorized by committee. It's time for Congress to modernize that law. One of the bills under consideration today would do just that. For example, the bill would extend CRS's authority to obtain agency information not only when CRS is authorized by a committee, but also when authorized by an individual member of Congress or when CRS itself anticipates Congress will need the information. The bill also states explicitly that agencies must produce information in, quote, a timely manner, end quote. The improved statutory language would not, of course, cure all of the problems that CRS faces with agencies. This subcommittee and other House and Senate committees will still need to lend CRS a helping hand by overseeing agency compliance with the law. At the same time, enacting a stronger statute would send a clear message to federal agencies that they are expected to comply with CRS requests. CRS is one of the few institutions dedicated to supporting the work of Congress, including congressional oversight. It is also one of the few institutions trusted by both sides of the aisle. In return, Congress should support CRS. Equipping CRS with better legal authority to obtain the information to which Congress is entitled under the Constitution will benefit every member of the House and Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bean. And at this time, I recognize Dr. Glassman for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Bice, Ranking Member Kilmer, Congressman Carey, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As you mentioned, I'm a senior fellow at the Government Affairs Institute at Georgetown University, and I'm also an alum of the Congressional Research Service, where my portfolio consisted of institutional issues in Congress, including congressional operations, budget and appropriations process, and separation of powers. I'm a legislative branch patriot and committed to the goal of a modern, capable, and powerful legislature. I strongly support the proposed legislation to expand CRS's access to data from the executive branch. I want to make 4 points today. First, access to data is vital for CRS. CRS's mission is to provide members and staff nonpartisan, objective, authoritative, and timely research and analysis. To do this, CRS analysts use data from a wide variety of government, academic, and private sector sources. There's simply no way to do high-quality research and policy analysis without data. During my time at CRS, I don't think there was a single day where I didn't make use of the vast data collections available to me at CRS or in the Library of Congress. More than once, I held my breath while looking for what I needed within CRS, knowing that if I didn't find it there, I was going to have to head to sources outside the library where the wait would be longer and the results unknown. Second, during my time at CRS, I often experienced frustrating difficulties obtaining data from the executive branch. In rare cases, I was simply told by a federal agency I couldn't have the data. But more often, my point of contact wasn't sure whether they should share the data with me. In many cases, they weren't even familiar with CRS. Where are you calling from? Is that a government agency? Was a very common response. Many of these contacts quite reasonably told me they'd have to check with their supervisors. So my data request, presumably pretty low priority on their busy agenda, was often forgotten until I called back 3 days later, only to have the entire process start over again. For data that I'd be requesting on an ongoing basis, my usual strategy was collegial. I tried to make a friend at the agency. In this sense, I often felt like I imagine journalists feel writing stories. Right? I always felt like I was asking someone to do me a favor. To be clear, in most cases where I sought data from the executive branch, I eventually was able to get it. But the time it could take, the hassle of the process, and the possibility of ultimately not getting the data often led to a worse CRS response for Congress. Third, the proposed legislation we have here today will improve the situation, especially if it's well implemented. I fully support H.R. 7593, requiring executive branch agencies to share information for all requests, not just committee requests, will give CRS analysts and management a firm leg to stand on when requesting this data from the agencies. For high-profile data requests that management gets involved in negotiating, the new authority will be extremely helpful on its own. And it'll be great for CRS analysts to be able to politely point to statutory language in emails and phone calls requesting data. That said, I don't believe the statutory authority alone will fully solve the problem. As noted earlier, the stumbling block for me was often timeliness, due to agency unfamiliarity with or uncertainty about their obligations. Consequently, for many analysts to agency simple data requests, the new authority will be most effective if it's paired with an information campaign, perhaps starting with the ledger affairs shops at the agencies, such that the agencies understand their updated obligations to provide CRS with data. Finally, the need for these data access authorities should be seen as a first step towards broader statutory reform for CRS. The CRS Organic Statute was last substantially revised in 1970. The reforms under consideration today suggest the entire statute could use a review. Congress has changed significantly in the last 50 years. Two quick examples. First, in 1970, policymaking was strongly centered in the committee system, controlled by powerful old bull chairs and built on top of a strict seniority system. In that atmosphere, it was natural to organize a support agency like CRS around the committees. Times have changed. The relative power of the committees has weakened, and policymaking roles have expanded far outside the committee system. CRS requests for analysis now routinely come from all corners of the Hill: member offices, leadership, CMOs, even informal working groups. Second, technology. The 1970 Act could not have foreseen the explosion of digital information and communications available to members and staff, all on computers carried in their pockets. This has made some of CRS's statutory missions seem plain anachronistic, such as providing committees at the beginning of Congress with lists of policy areas they might want to study, while also in some ways making CRS seem more distant from the Hill, as emails and PDF reports have replaced face-to-face briefings and physical information delivery. Updating the CRS statute to adjust to these realities would better focus the mission of the service and allow it to better serve the members. Thanks for having me here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Glassman. And finally, Dr. Hart, you are recognized for 5 minutes for opening statement.
Thank you. As someone who spent most of their career in the executive branch, I'm happy to say I know what CRS is. So thank you for the invitation to join today's hearing. As you noted, I lead the Data Foundation, which is a nonpartisan national nonprofit that works to improve government, business, and society through open data and evidence-informed policy. And I'm really pleased to be here to share perspectives about the use of data and evidence to support Congress. I get to zoom out a bit. Because Congress needs data, it's actively using evidence and really always has. As the world, country, and Congress change, Congress really needs to review as an institution whether it's actually receiving the right kinds of data and evidence to support effective oversight and decision-making. Importantly, our value systems are actually part of how each of you as members represent the values in our democratic republic, and that's actually vital to decision-making and our success as a country. That's a very important input that we should not miss. But evidence must have a seat at the table, and it must be a key seat. And Congress, as an institution, needs to have procedures and processes to access what members and staff actually need to fulfill effective legislative and oversight functions. So, in a sense, we are aspiring to align the best available evidence in decision-making for the legislative process. So, ensuring Congress has the data and evidence it needs at the right time and in the right format for decisions requires planning and coordination and even a sense of humility about what we want and need to know. Evidence helps determine, as Mr. Kilmer was alluding to, whether, how, when, where, and for whom policies work, and also helps describe the conditions and solutions that we want. We've seen lots of bipartisan examples over the years. I alluded to some in my written statement, including things like the bipartisan negotiations that achieves solvency for the Social Security Disability Trust Fund back in 2015, along with major reforms for the program. We're talking right now about the child tax credit expansions and improved evaluations for tax expenditures, a major point of discussion that we desperately need. We know from the CTC that it has impacts on reducing child poverty. Using evidence should be easy for decision makers and not challenged by institutional processes and barriers to access. This is why I strongly endorse the Congressional Evidence-Based Policymaking Commission resolution, a mouthful. A broader cohort of the data and evidence community will also agree with this. Establishing this commission is a low-cost, rapid mechanism for addressing the question of how Congress can establish capacity, process, and procedure to better use data and evidence. There are so many resources today that already exist to do this. And the question is, how can we better achieve this goal through congressional support agencies and executive branch agencies? A prior evidence commission back in 2017, established by then Speaker Paul Ryan and Senator Patty Murray, focused on ways to drastically improve executive branch capabilities through data infrastructure and evidence capacity. They achieved unanimous recommendations. Because of the Ryan Murray Commission and those unanimous recommendations, Congress passed the Evidence Act, the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. It includes Congressman Kilmer's Open Government Data Act, and Congress later passed the National Secure Data Service Authority. The Ryan Murray Commission directly led to an improved understanding of what evidence is, established new leadership roles like the chief data officers and evaluation officers to coordinate with senior leaders, new data strategies and data governance in agencies, new data sharing projects and evaluation, advanced data governance with privacy improvements and planning for evidence through learning agendas, resulted in OMB defining evaluation as a core function of government. There's even an expectation of open data by default in the executive branch. This is a lot. And all of that happened over the last 5 years, but did not necessarily align with the congressional support function and the timing of decisions in Congress. So that means there's a lot to think about for this institution and in Congress. Congress still needs to think about its capacity and what infrastructure it needs, noting the 50-year-old design and gaps that currently exist. Should Congress have a CDO, like it mandated for executive branch agencies? How do we think about CRS data access, noting that the executive branch is building out a standard access portal for data access? How do we think about engagement and transparency? There are so many other issues that a congressionally focused commission can think about. The commission offers an opportunity to support members and congressional staff in the endeavor to produce and encourage good policy outcomes for the American people. Congress needs a coherent, depoliticized discussion about the process and accountability of evidence, specifically what it wants to function better as an institution in using knowledge, starting with the question. I encourage members to advance this Congressional Evidence Commission to support this discussion and planning for ways to strengthen Congress in the years ahead. Thank you.